You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
Welcome. You are listening to Watching the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. Well, what can you say about what's happening in the world today? Everything is insane. Everything's mixed up. Everything you thought you knew or you believed you knew, well, maybe you don't know it. Maybe you were wrong, but it's never too late to correct your course, take the right actions, and profit from the insanity, because that's what's happening now. It's completely insane. Our good friend Lobo Tiggre, formerly known as Louis James, is with us now to help hopefully shed some light on the path ahead. It's great to have you back, Lobo. And so what the heck are we supposed to do here? I mean, everything seems to be going nuts.
Well, first, thanks for having me back on. Hello, audience. Happy to be with you again. And let me pause before I will answer the question. And I do think we can make money here. But since we framed it this way, I think we should actually stop and address sort of the philosophical point here of, profiteering, evil speculators, and so on. You didn't start the war, Kerry. I didn't start the war. None of us asked for any COVID lockdowns or all these things that have happened to us. We didn't stack the deck and place the cards in front of us that we've been dealt. But these are the cards we've been dealt. And there is nothing wrong, immoral, bad in any way from doing the best for yourself, for your family, for those who depend on you, your loved ones, and even for posterity. One of the big takeaways that I got from working with Doug Casey for so many years, and there were many famous Doug Casey-isms, but one of the things that he really drove home for me that I didn't pick up from anywhere else was how important it is for capital to be preserved and concentrated. That capital is productive capacity, that capital creates things in the world, without a government program, without a committee or all this stuff. If you've got the money to do something, then you can get it done. And I know, for example, right now, Elon Musk has his supporters, admirers, and detractors. And yes, he got government subsidies. I know. But look at this, he wants to build a rocket and go to Mars. So he just does it, right? Or, he wants a free speech platform. He calls himself a free speech absolutist. He just buys it, right? So there is, it's cliche to say that money is power, but it is. But it's a voluntary power. It comes from transactions. That's the beauty of the free market, is that if it's undistorted, if it's not criminally pressured and so on, it's win-win transactions between each side thinking they got the better deal. I want the steak more than I want this money, and vice versa. So sorry, I don't want to be too long-winded here, but I think this is important. If we're going to talk about making money at a time when there's suffering in the world, people are dying in this war, there's going to be hunger apparently with the fallout from the war. I just think the audience should keep in mind that we didn't cause this, and we don't help anybody by being victims of it. And we can't do good for ourselves, our family, and the world by capitalizing on any opportunities we see ahead of us. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir for you, Kerry, but I just have to put that out there because people push back sometimes.
Hey, I totally embrace what you're saying, Lobo. Totally true. One thing I'd like to point out, yes, Elon Musk got subsidies initially, but so did Solyndra. And Solyndra is not here anymore, but Elon Musk is. That's just the nature of crony capitalism these days, that oftentimes the government's got its thumb in the pie, and you have to work with them or you're not going to move ahead. But just because you've got government support and sponsorship doesn't automatically make you a success. In the same regard, if you're totally detached, divorced from the government in any possible way you can be, which is, I think, what us freedom-thinking people all aspire to, then you can make it without the government too, without the loans and all of that stuff. Doesn't mean you shouldn't take it if you can get it for free money. Why not? But really, it's still up to you in the end. Just because you got your Uncle Sam helping you out to become a success isn't going to make you a success. So I think that's the important thing to focus on there. And he paid back all of his government loans. How many people do you know who haven't been out of school for 20 years, haven't paid back your student loans yet, right?
Yeah, I don't know how far we want to go down this rabbit hole, Kerry, but just briefly for the audience, if they're interested, there's some fascinating history on this that really highlights this example. And that is if you contrast the Union Pacific Railroad, which was sort of the one favored by Congress, it got all kinds of subsidies, and it won the race to connect the East and West Coast. And there was the Great Northern, who was run by J.J. Hill, who was the prototype for Nat Taggart in the Atlas Shrugged novels. That's how I came across this. So the Great Northern was the second railroad. But within 3 years, the Union Pacific had gone bankrupt because they raced. The embankments were too steep, the curves were too sharp, the rails wore out, they didn't do things properly. J.J. Hill built customer bases as he went. He gave people land and a cow and a bushel of seeds or something to create customers as he went to support the actual business of being in the railroad. And then the Dust Bowl came along and he got blamed for that. But point to the thing about subsidies versus entrepreneurship. Some really interesting history there if anybody wants to look that up.
Yep, that is a great point. And the original railroad had many flaws because they were being paid by the government. I don't remember how much they were getting paid. It was an enormous sum of money for its day. Plus, they got 10 miles of land, I think it was, on either side of the right-of-way. So that's why all of these railroads eventually became land companies. And, when Penn Central went bankrupt, another case of these companies keep getting bailed out, then they have good times, they don't learn anything from it, and then they go bankrupt again. This happened to the railroads in World War I as well. In fact, J.P. Morgan made his fortune, a big portion of it, restructuring, quote unquote, screwing the creditors and the shareholders and becoming the new owners of these railroads. He made a huge bit of his fortune from that. And I think what we're saying really inherently here is that government interference in a market creates distortions. And eventually, if you're poised, you can profit from those distortions, sometimes a little bit, sometimes a great amount. So we got an insane world. We got supply chains just disintegrating before your very eyes. I believe here, this is my opinion, I've held this opinion for probably a good 3 to 5 years, because of the government's policies towards energy and towards resources, that we are heading for massive shortages of resources in the next 5 to 10 years. Now, I didn't know when this was going to strike, but it's obvious now that it's here. And unless the government immediately reverses, starts allowing mines to produce in 3 years instead of 30. I mean, look how long it takes for to develop. If
ever, right?
Yeah, if ever.
Resolution 30 years and then, sorry, can't have it, right?
Yeah. So it requires.
Sorry, let me jump in. I've interrupted already, Kerry. So let me go ahead and take the ball there down the field a bit. I mean, you know me, and in our audience, if they remember our past interviews, they know I'm not the guy who comes on and says doom and gloom, the market's about to crash next week, or the world is, World War III is starting. That's not me. But it is striking that right now we are literally closer to World War III than we've been in decades. I don't think it's going to happen. I think, even Putin doesn't want that to happen. But that there's even the potential for battlefield nukes, and that mainstream media are talking about that. I mean, that is a really striking thing. A year ago, nobody would have imagined that we could be saying such things with a straight face and, not wearing tinfoil hats or something. This is actually a possibility that any person looking ahead in the world and thinking, what do I need to plan? How do I, benefit myself, my loved ones from what's going on? We need to think about these things. So, what a world in which this is happening. So not World War III, but just, my big statement I want to make is actually, I see that the things you've just described as a real paradigm shift coming to the world. And people like to throw around the phrase, game changer. Oh, this is a real game changer. We got a new water cooler for the office. Yeah, woo-hoo. Right? And it's usually
flat screen TV. That's a real game changer, right?
In my world, it's usually, we've got grab samples that are kilos per ton of silver on our exploration. It's just a grab sample. Of course, it's high grade. It looks shiny, so you grabbed it, right? So we hear a lot about game changers and so on, but we're seeing this, that as you framed it in your intro, the world is gone mad. It's not possible to stuff the genie back in the bottle. There was this huge peace dividend we got for decades after the end of the Cold War. And that has just reversed in front of our eyes. And it's not going away. Even if the war in the Ukraine peters out, and who knows, it might actually spill over to Moldova instead of petering out. But even if it does peter out and becomes this war of attrition, it just kind of gets pushed off the headlines for the months ahead. The sanctions aren't going away. And from the get-go, I have friends in Ukraine and I have family in Belarus and friends in Russia too. So I'm not dismissing the human aspect here. This is very personal for me, Kerry. But as an investor looking at what's going on over there, Ukraine and Russia, the border skirmish there, it's not World War III. But the sanctions, the economic war, and the fallout from that is huge. This is truly game-changing. It is a paradigm shift. I think it's a one-way change. We're seeing a new Iron Curtain go up, and it's getting higher and thicker by the day. The sanctions haven't stopped. I think this is a big deal. I think if there's one takeaway, I hope the audience, whatever else we say, is that this is important. You need to think about it. The world is changing. The financial world is changing. And not just global geopolitics, but the global supply chains and the entire landscape for resources, for minerals, for energy, for metals. This is all changing before our eyes. And the push come to shove that you were talking about, permitting forever and all that stuff. Just a few months ago, I would not have been able to say this, but I think now that the writing is on the wall and the NIMBY problem that mining and resources have had for so long, I think that will give way. I think the green agenda is more important to the powers that be than the NIMBY attitudes. And I think we will see things get permitted. I think we'll see, what jurisdictions are workable will be changing in the future. So this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. Paradigm shift, game changer. That's not exaggeration. I have one hand waving here. I'm not doing too much arm waving. I really think this is important, and investors need to be paying attention to this going forward.
Couldn't agree with you more. And just to go back in history, 2-3 years before World War I, the world was at peace. Nobody thought that we could ever have a world war. And, then the whole thing happened in Bosnia, Herzegovina. And before you knew it, all of these crumbling powers became easy prey to the emerging powers. And we had a world war. Nobody expected it. It came out of the blue. So I'm not saying it's going to happen here. In fact, probably won't. But certainly there is a new world financial order emerging, and resources. It's going to be a battle for resources. It's often said Vietnam was about oil. I don't know if that's true or not, but certainly World War II had a lot to do.
Japan, it was an oil embargo that brought Japan in the way that went down.
Yeah, exactly. And the trade embargo on Japan, that's what led to the attack on Pearl Harbor. So all of this history, Lobo, one thing we learned from history is that we don't learn from history, right?
Yeah. And if you think about it, I'm no Putin fan, but, he's not wrong in some of his complaints.
Not at all.
And broken deals. And he's absolutely not wrong to say that the West is waging economic war on. That is clearly the case. It's the stated goal to break the Russian economy, to put pressure on him. And initially there was some talk about trying to spare the Russian people. It's not their fault. It's just the lunatic at top. But sanctioning Putin and his friends didn't cut the mustard. So now it is clearly economic war on Russia.
Yeah,
that has major consequences. Maybe mutually assured destruction isn't as mad as it sounds, because nobody wants it to come to that. And maybe there's something to that. I was a big critic of that policy as a college student. But you know what? Nobody pulled that trigger in the end. And now the reality that I'm saying is that economic war is war. The West is waging war on Russia right now, and they see it that way.
Yeah.
But even they don't want it to go nuclear. So there's a smidgen of hope there, and I hope it stays that way because, in the past, you as a student of history, you know this. If you blockade a country, that's considered an act of war, like shooting war. So that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, like Germany in World War I. We had a blockade against them, and then we were shipping arms on
Lusitania.
The Lusitania, and there's a big controversy over what did they know, or did the weapons get on there the last moment? What happened? I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that the Lusitania, the unsinkable, got sunk, and these things happen in war because once you blockade, then it's an act of war. And just like what we did with Japan, and they viewed it as an act of war. So let's hope that cooler heads prevail. Let's hope that, it used to be, now the most dangerous job in the world is being a Russian general in the Ukraine, which has replaced being a convenience store clerk in New York City after dark, which used to be the most dangerous job in the United States, right?
Don't just survive, thrive. The Financial Survival Network.
Fury Gold Mines is a Canada-focused exploration and development company committed to aggressively growing its scalable, high-grade gold assets with major drill campaigns planned across its 3.5 million-ounce portfolio. Fury is led by a management team of proven explorers and developers with a track record of success in advancing and financing project development. Fury Gold Mines is well-positioned to create value for investors with low-risk development growth and the potential for a new major discovery. Fury Gold Mines trades on the TSX and NYSE American under the ticker FURY. To learn more, go to furygoldmines.com. That's furygoldmines.com.
This is the Financial Survival Network, the information you need to thrive now more than ever.
What a world, Kerry. But so to sort of dive in here, there's on investment and how we make money here going forward. There's some forces yet to be clarified. Like it's easy to talk about stagflation, which I think you and I have before. That's been my outlook because of the COVID shutdowns, which, by the way, aren't done either. And we're still playing out in the US from what was already done. And on top of that, you have this war. So I don't want to be so arrogant as to say, I know what's going to happen. Here's the playbook, and do A, B, and C, and you'll be a millionaire. That's just not the way the real world works. And I'm always suspicious of anybody who has all the answers, right? But the war and the fallout from the war on top of the COVID situation, that does create, real economic harm. So, the recession versus is recession, could it actually lead to deflation? I have discounted the deflation argument before because I've always said the moment that begins to happen, the powers that be will throw money at it. But if there's enough harm, and I still think that's true, by the way, but it might take a while for that money to get thrown about it. It might take a while for that money to have its effect. It's possible that if there's enough harm from the continuing shutdowns in China are a big worry. It's the manufacturing center of the world now, like it or not. That's just the way it is. And if that gets shut down, that has big problems. And throwing money at it won't make those products flow. And more things break. So we're on the same page. I see. I just want to caution people that it's dangerous to think what will happen. And even though we see all the money printing and the consequences of fiscal and monetary policy still to be played out. And even though there's all this tough talk from the Fed of, we're going to fight inflation. Inflation is priority number one. Like Ford used to say, job number one, right? They say that.
Yeah.
But we know that they can't afford to let interest rates go up too much because then the U.S. government becomes insolvent. And we also know that, if they cause too much pain, there will be people screaming for the government to do something about it. So sort of middle to longer term, my outlook remains stagflationary. I think all that we've seen in your audience, I'm sure 99.9% of them, I don't need to explain it, the monetary and fiscal policy already done argues for more inflation ahead. I mean, the powers that be keep being wrong. They keep calling for peak inflation. They keep moving that goalpost. It still hasn't peaked yet. So my view remains stagflationary. I just want to warn that there's enough new volatility on the table now that we could see a recession that swamps that inflation for a time in the nearer term. And that's not a prediction. I'm saying it is a possibility we need to keep in mind.
And that is a theory.
Make a difference.
That is a theory as to China's re-embracing of lockdowns in Beijing, in Shanghai, by choking off the economy. All right, they get to create a recession, basically bring down commodities prices, because this super cycle in commodities prices, even though the Chinese have been strategically acquiring resources around the globe, especially in Africa, it's not enough. And it means that their economy is going to crash because they can't, and the government's at risk because their inflation is way higher than our inflation, because their inflation, they're a manufacturing-based economy. So, of course, I'm not downplaying the United States and the West inflation, but the inflation in China is far worse, because if the components going in to make a car or 50% of the cost of the car, and those components double, that means that your car went up by 25%, right? So their labor components way lower, their commodity costs are way higher, impacts their economy. So the theory being, and I don't want to call it a conspiracy theory, it's a hypothesis that by shutting down Shanghai, Beijing, they will bring down the commodity price bull. And to some extent, it probably has already, but maybe not as much.
It's had an impact already, but it's a really interesting question. Like, if that were true, how does that change, or how does the path change given the new Iron Curtain and the disruptions to the supply chain? I mean, it might have worked in the globalized world we had before. There's another theory, by the way, that they're doing it because they know it will hurt the West more than themselves. So it's another way to try to level the playing field here. That, we take a body blow in order to be able to deliver a bigger body blow. Above my pay grade. I don't know what she was thinking. But if any of these things are a calculated move, it seems to me they assume the globalized world of before, where we're all in this together. But now that division lines are being drawn up and plans are being drawn, no, we're going to do it ourselves. We need energy independence. We need critical mineral independence and so on. It might be that things don't work quite as planned. And if the powers that be in Beijing are doing this, I could actually see this really damaging Xi's support. Now, he seems pretty invulnerable, but behind the scenes, who knows what's really going on? And people in Shanghai are pissed. I mean, you see these viral videos of people going out and fighting with the sanitation workers, trying to put cages around their buildings and things. It's really striking. I mean, ever since Tiananmen Square, that you don't protest Beijing in China, and yet it's happening now. So if she loses control over there, who knows what's happening? That's not a big prediction. I'm just saying this is the kind of crazy world we live in. By the way, here's another key takeaway. Besides big changes, one-way changes, it's not going back the way it was. That's the number one thing I like to say. The other thing is, we hope that things don't get too crazy. We hope the world doesn't blow up. But if it does, if ever there was a time to make sure that your gold and silver bullion is secure, that you have a meaningful amount in your direct personal control, it's fine to have a segregated account in Singapore or something like that, but that's not going to do you any good in a Mad Max scenario, which I'm not predicting. But even, never mind Mad Max, let's say a Lehman moment where things stop moving and you can't get access to assets that are distributed across the globe. This is really important. This isn't tinfoil hat stuff. I think this is a reasonable, prudent measure that everybody should take. I'm not talking about selling the farm and sitting on a stack of silver coins. I'm talking about maintaining a reasonable amount of bullion just as insurance. Hope the heck you don't have to use it but sleep better knowing that you have it.
Hey, and adding to that, all right, if you're on certain prescription drugs, get a year's supply of it. All right, I've been telling everybody this. People laugh at me when I tell them this because they think, hey, I get a prescription at the drugstore and I just go and I fill it. Well, that's a major supply chain issue in the making there. Have some emergency food, whether it's cans, whether you put 100 pounds of hamburger in the freezer, whatever it is, have a supply and a water filter.
Make sure you have a generator if you do that. Oh, there's nothing worse than the smell of I've experienced it.
Yeah.
You have a meat stash in the freezer and there's a power failure. And, oh my God.
I got a generator, and you're in Puerto Rico, you almost have to have a generator there.
Yes.
And but emergency food is like canned food, freeze-dried food. Hey, the stuff is horrible. Like it doesn't taste that bad, but it's the most unhealthy crap on the planet. But, you know, if it's that or starve, you might be happy you had it. I have a 1-year supply of this stuff. You know, there was a sponsor way back when that sent me some samples, and I recently restocked on it. Somebody was nice enough to steal a couple of tubs of it out of my garage at one point. And but now's the time. Like you have to take these measures because in any event, hey, you live in Puerto Rico, I live in Florida. We're subject to hurricanes, massive hurricanes, natural.
We're not talking about a lifestyle change. We're not talking about, you know, becoming a hermit in Idaho in some bunker. We're talking about really a small investment in a kind of insurance, a physical insurance.
Yeah.
That does no harm. You know, at the very worst, your neighbors laugh at you a bit and it gets thrown away after a few years or something like that. You know what? I can live with that. And you're quite right. You know, the Puerto Rico example is really telling. You know, we got out of Dodge, I have to say, but you hear about my neighbors and the electricity goes down and we have a generator and we have enough diesel in our building for 2 weeks. It went on for 6 months.
Right.
And then diesel becomes scarce. And when the electricity goes out, we have a cistern, but it's not on top of the building, it's the bottom. So no electricity, no water. And then you say, you know, you're going to go get your prescription filled. Well, nobody's working. The pharmacies are closed. And if you can, how many people have cash, right? You know, you pay for every, you don't even need a credit card anymore. Just wave your phone at the thing or something.
Yeah, that's what I do most places.
So the ATMs were shut down, Kerry.
Yeah.
Even if you had cash in your savings account, you couldn't get it out of the ATM. There's no electricity for the ATMs.
And no cell phones working while the towers are destroyed. Have a holding of cash. I don't know how much you need. You know, I've been stocking up over the past month or two, you know, going to the ATM, getting money and hiding it in an appropriate place. And you know, I think you need a holding of cash. Well, we're out of time now, but Lobo, just tell us where we go to sign up at the Independent Speculator.
IndependentSpeculator.com. And the quick thing I would say is if you sign up for our free weekly digest, I won't spam you. You won't get a flood of daily advertisements in your inbox. And you can see my thinking. We didn't get much into specifics here, Kerry, but the specifics are covered. Market areas that I'm investing in, what I'm looking to do. It's in the free digest.
Totally. And I am a subscriber, and I urge every one of you, go out there, sign up. I mean, hey, insurance, like Lobo, you know, you have insurance on your house. If it doesn't get robbed for 10 years, do you just say, you know, that was the biggest waste of money I ever did? Or you have car insurance and you don't get in an accident and just get rid of it? No, insurance is there for the unexpected, unforeseen, and unlikely occurrences, but occurrences that you can't afford to sustain on your own without a sharing of risk. Here, you get insurance within your reach, whether it's food, medical, or cash, or precious metals. You need to have an insurance policy. I'll leave it at that, but go over to independentspeculator.com, sign up for Lobo's free newsletter, come to our site, financialsurvivalnetwork.com, sign up for our free newsletter as well. And if you got a question for Lobo, shoot me an email, kl@kerrylutz.com. We'll get you an answer. Lobo, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming by.
Thank you, Kerry.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.